Hey everyone, Nathan Rose here. Today I'm recording from Graz in Austria. Now the reason that I'm here is because I'm playing in a classical chess tournament over the board. These are long, slow games, and I've just had my first game. To be honest, I was a little bit apprehensive coming into this tournament because I signed up to it a long time ago, bought my flights, bought my hotel, but to be honest, I haven't really done a lot of preparation. Been pretty busy with the YouTube channel, as I hope you can appreciate. Lots of new videos have been posted, and really there hasn't been a lot of time for me to do my own chess study. So we're going to see how we go. I told myself going into the first game that I just wanted to relax, enjoy it. It is a game after all. I'm playing a higher rated player, so let's see how I do. By the way, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. I do all kinds of content on chess, and if these videos that I'm posting on the tournament are popular, then I'll do more of them. So let me know in the comments too if you like this format. Okay, let's get into the game. I've got black. My opponent is rated 1900 and something. I'm about 200 points lower rated than that. So the game begins with the Queen's Pawn opening, d4. We get some pretty standard opening moves. I play the King's Indian, and White adopts this fianchetto variation. This way of playing tends to be more positional in nature. A lot of players who start out with 1d4 with the white pieces are looking for a more long-term strategic game. And the King's Indian, for that type of player, can pose a bit of a problem because it gets very sharp very early. So by going for this symmetrical fianchetto structure, White is looking for a calmer game without getting into too much king safety trouble. So we both develop. I castle, so does White, and I play d6. The pawn break that I'm looking for is e5. That gives me the pawn structure that I'm most familiar with. Knight c6 further supports e5, and there it is. Now White decides to close the center with d5. Another way that White can play is to actually capture here, in which case we get an early queen trade quite often. And White could continue with bishop to g5, targeting this knight which is guarding the weak d5 square. So just to show what White's idea is, if you play a move like h6, then you're actually encouraging the idea that White wanted to play anyway, to capture this knight and then dive in with knight to d5. There's a fork here, and after you move the bishop away or defend it, then White wins a pawn. But that didn't happen, so let's go back to the game. White had instead played d5, and now I play this odd-looking move, knight to b8. Going back to the starting square, this looks strange, but it's part of the theory. The idea is to eventually move the knight around to c5 from where it's well placed. So we'll see this plan in action. Playing a5 first is useful so that when the knight eventually does get to c5, White won't be able to easily play b4 to kick it away because of the pawn. And White begins this maneuver to trade off the knight once it lands there. So White has seen this all before too, most likely. I mean, he's 1900, he's studied the theory as well, and not just the moves, but also the thematic ideas. So he's brought the knight around here to trade it off once my knight arrives. I want to avoid allowing White to make this capture. So just to illustrate, if I played something slow, then this pawn structure is not good for me. These pawns are doubled now. This pawn can be a problem sometimes later on. And also later on, this pawn can become a potential passed pawn. Not now, obviously, but there are lines where this can be an issue. So you always want to avoid this pawn structure. And that's why I decided to play knight to d7, so that if white captures, then I've got a knight to capture back with. This also allows me to play f5, which is often the next pawn break that black is looking for in the King's Indian defense. So now white plays bishop to e3, renewing the threat of capturing on c5. And here I play b6. So now if white chooses to capture, then I can take back with this pawn. And for white, the pawn break they're often trying to make is c5. And that's obviously extremely hard to do with a black pawn on c5. So this is favourable for black. And so white doesn't capture on c5 after I've played b6, and instead plays queen to d2. So we're out of the opening now. Both of us are looking for middle game ideas, and I think the motivation of queen d2 is that white wants to play bishop to h6 and trade off this important fianchettoed bishop. That can make my own king safety a little bit more shaky in some cases. Often this fianchettoed bishop is an important defender of the dark squares around the black king. But I think that this move, queen to d2, is inaccurate here because it loses a tempo after I now capture on d3. White has to take back, and now I get the other knight to c5. Again, if white were to take this, then this pawn structure is good for me. So white instead goes back with queen to d2, renewing the idea of bishop to h6. So now I play f5. This is the move you're always looking to make in the King's Indian. And white plays king to h2. I think I understand this idea. I didn't really speak to my opponent after the game, but he played king to h2, I think, because of the following idea. Let's say that after f5 he'd gone ahead and played bishop to h6. I think he was probably worried about a capture on e4, because if white captures back, then this pawn can be hanging at the end. That's, I think, what king to h2 was motivated by. Okay, so let's go back to the game after king to h2. I was looking for a plan as well. Like, I'm expecting that bishop to h6 is going to come. So what can I do to create my own threats? I was thinking of bishop to a6 to target this pawn, but that just seemed to have an extremely simple way of being refuted with b3, and now this bishop is misplaced. So after some time, I realized that I could actually play the move f4. A move which I'm pretty sure would have surprised my opponent, because it seems as though white has enough pawns and pieces defending that square. Like, white couldn't take, and take, right? Well, it turns out no, white cannot do that because of this idea. This sacrifice, and, well, if white plays that, hopefully you can see the follow-up. This pin is one effect of white playing king to h2. So white can't do that. f4 is a pawn break which works tactically. So after f4, white does capture. I capture back, and then white plays bishop to d4. White didn't want to capture this knight because, again, this pawn structure is something that white never really wants to go for. But after bishop to d4, I have a pretty strong move here. And I saw it straight away, but in classical chess, when there's an hour and a half on the clock to start the game, you always do take your time and make sure that you play the very strongest move available. But the strongest move available here is f3. Attacks white's light squared bishop. So the bishop really only has one square to move to. And now I've got the follow-up queen to h4. And as it turns out, there is no way for white to add an extra defender to this pawn. So what a turn of events. Just a few moves after wondering what my long-term strategic plan should be, I've now got this completely crushing position against an opponent who's almost 200 points higher rated than me. He's not going to be able to stop me from capturing on h3. And in such situations, you've really got to hold yourself back. Already thoughts were going through my mind like my opponent might just resign here, but that's not going to happen. And you have to stay focused and never relax until the score sheets are signed. So that's what I was telling myself. So white decides to capture on g7, and there's a lot of tempting moves here. And I did take some time here, actually. The most obvious move, of course, is to just take on h3 with check, winning a pawn, and forcing the king to g1. After that, you could consider taking the bishop. Another move that you could think about, and which I was calculating, was actually not to play the check and not to take the bishop, but to actually play rook to f4 directly. The idea of this is to create a mating net. Like, okay, let's say that white tries to save their material, so white's a piece up. The idea here is that you can use this rook, which came to f4, to deliver this check, which is pretty fatal. The white king doesn't have an escape square. The only move is this, and that's mate. Turns out that rook to f4 would have been excellent as well, but this move comes with some risk, right? You have to calculate this and be extremely confident in your calculation. You are sacrificing a piece, so if you're wrong, then white will be a piece up. I was pretty sure that this would work, but what I ended up playing instead was actually just to take the bishop, keeping this threat alive and keeping this threat alive as well. White still has no way of defending this pawn, and it just seemed to be lower risk. All the same threats are there, but I'm not material down. So white plays king to g1 so that I can't take on h3 with check. But I do take on h3 anyway, with a threat against the white rook. So now I'm a pawn up, but really material is not the thing here. White's king is going to be in all sorts of trouble momentarily. He plays rook to d1 to try to save his material, but this is the move that I was looking at earlier, right? Rook to f4, that's fatal. White really has to give up the queen if he doesn't want to be checkmated. So that's of course tantamount to resigning. One other line that he could try perhaps is to take this pawn here, but actually then there's this checkmate. So with that victory, I'm off to a great start. Fair to say that my opponent's plan of playing a more positional, strategic opening variation didn't pan out quite the way that he was hoping. He didn't end up avoiding king safety trouble, did he? But it's a long tournament, and there's still plenty of chess left to be played. I'm going to leave it here now. I think I'm going to go have a beer to celebrate. If you've enjoyed this format, do leave a comment down below. I'm sure there'll be games where I don't do quite so well as this. So if you're enjoying seeing my games and my thought process, then I can do more videos like this as the tournament progresses. Just to quickly recap a couple of the key moments, I think that it was the ability to play f4 tactically, a move which I think my opponent missed. And then after the way the game continued, f3 put white in a hopeless position. After bishop h1, queen h4, the game was pretty much over at this point. So one more time, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this one, and drop a comment if you enjoyed this video review format. I'm Nathan Rose, bye for now.